Welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Thank you for being here today.
I'm delighted.
So today we're honoring the women's right to vote that happened in 1920, and it's been 90 years, and we want to celebrate that. It's the anniversary. So today we want to talk a little bit about, women's voting rights, their ability, to be a part of the political process, and some of the issues that are going on for women today. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in at the White House with Tchen. So I'm so glad to have the White House Council on Women and Girls. So what we're going to do today, I'm from BlogHer. I'm representing the blogger community as well as the social media community and women online. And we have a lot of questions that I posed. I sort of did a blog post and allowed the community to ask questions. And so I'm here today. I'm going to present some of those questions. I'm also going to try to get some of those questions off of what's happening online right now through Facebook and our live stream. So please make sure you're asking questions as well so I can make sure I can get those included in this sort of 30-minute segment of chat with Tina. Thank you, Tina.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Shireen. And I'm really delighted to be here. I'm, as somebody who's done a lot of work on women's rights my entire adult life, August 26th has always been a big day as Women's Equality Day, but probably no bigger than this year where it's remarkably the 90th anniversary of when the 19th Amendment became a part of the Constitution and women finally got the right to vote.
Yes. So I want to start with a couple of questions, especially around the history of, what happened during 1920, the women's suffrage movement. What do you think we have been able to accomplish since that time? And then what are some of the challenges you think we're still facing as women who are now a part of the political process?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think I want to pause a moment on this day just to acknowledge the struggle that getting the right to vote took. Obviously, coming in 1920, came, years and years and years after others in our country, the white men got the right to vote first as we struggled through the Civil War, as we continued to struggle throughout the 20th century on voting rights, and we continue to struggle today. And the story of our country has been just that struggle towards a more perfect union, and I think the passage of the 19th Amendment through what women like, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Sojourner Truth and Ida B. Wells, really did the sacrifices they made, really literally putting their bodies on the line as they demonstrated and they went on hunger strikes and they did the things to call attention to the need and the importance of granting women the right to vote. It was so important. And it's important now that people exercise their right to vote. We just came out of an election 2 years ago where there was more and more participation by women, by people across the spectrum in our electoral process. That's something that needs to continue and is very important. And yet we still have lots of struggles. And we look today and we see even as women are have now crossed the threshold of being 50% of the workforce. Today, that nonetheless, the wage gap still persists. So women still only overall make only 70 cents on the dollar that a man makes. If you're an African American woman, you're only making 69 cents for every dollar that a man makes. And if you're a Latina, you're only making 62 cents for every dollar that a man makes. That inequality persists even today, 90 years after women got the right to vote.
So thank you for that. And so there are still some questions actually around some of the challenges that you mentioned. But I also want to sort of think about in terms of now that the political process has turned a little bit where people are organizing online to talk about politics, to get people out to vote. And, what does that mean in terms of where women are going now online and their power of using that as a vehicle for politics?
Well, the power of the online community and all of you out there, is really, we're only, I think, slowly realizing what tremendous influence that can have and how we're able to reach so many more people and get them engaged, not just on the times when there's an election, but all throughout the process as we make policy, as we debate policy on a year-round basis, on a 24/7 basis. And it's a great democratic tool for people across the board, old, young, to be involved in really understanding and learning about issues and then being vocal and speaking out around them and telling their friends about it. So it's something that We here at the White House take very seriously, are really delighted to participate in providing information to the online community. Whitehouse.gov, I'll repeat that and send everybody there, is something that we've spent a lot of time on developing and getting information so we can get blog posts up and keep current information out there for folks. So I want to thank everybody who's been online and who pays attention to these issues and to communicates about them.
Well, thank you for that. But there are also some people who aren't online who are not always able to actually participate from that framework and that ability. So in terms of how do we engage those that are important to be a part of the process, but doesn't necessarily have the social capital in the online space to do so?
Well, I think as we have always wanted to do, we are trying constantly. My office, I wear two hats here at the White House. One is as the executive director of the Council on Women and Girls, as we mentioned, but I'm also the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, which is the president's outreach office, and it's our responsibility to really get the message out across the board to all of the different constituency groups. And my staff, track about 60 different kinds of constituencies, including women, that we're trying to reach. And we're trying to use every tool, in addition to new media tools, earned media and the traditional media, reaching out to organizations, doing conference calls so people can dial in to toll-free numbers to hear what's going on, and emailing us, writing us letters. We work very closely with the correspondence office. We're trying to use every tool we can to make sure we carry out the president's charge to us, which is to make sure that people understand that this is their administration and we want them to be a part of it. We want to hear from them, and we also want to make sure that they get the message from us about what's going on.
So I do have another question around voting, and it has to do with women who happen to be incarcerated and don't have the ability to vote as well, especially women in communities of color where they may be the single source of resource for families and children. There's some challenges with their ability to be able to vote once they're incarcerated, and sometimes they're incarcerated for things that are can be challenging at best to mention in terms of situations with being in positions of maybe still in Pampers and in jail for 5 years or something like that, and separated for years from their children, but really we're just trying to survive and take care of their children at that particular moment. What do you think about some of the challenges there that their rights to vote are taken away and they are not able to participate in it?
Well, a couple of things. One is, the issue of we, as an administration, really support the voting rights and voting rights for all. I have to say I'm a little bit limited in what I can say specifically on the issue of the voting rights for women who are incarcerated, because there's active litigation going on in that. Our Department of Justice has been involved in that, so it's sort of a legal question. I have to refer to them. I would say generally that we are obviously in support of voting rights as a general matter. More specifically to the issues that you raised around incarcerated women, we are also doing a number of things around, where things are unjust in our criminal justice system.
Right.
Most notably, I have to say, the president signed, just when Congress concluded 2 weeks ago, the Fair Sentencing Act, which is an act that really for 17 years people have been working towards to try to make more equal. We're still not equal yet, but make more equal the sentencing between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, and really eliminate the 100-to-1 disparity in sentencing that occurred. And it was a real achievement to get that passed and signed, so that some of those issues of people of color being unfairly incarcerated behind bars for extended periods of time,
Exactly.
Gets eliminated.
Well, thank you for that question, the answer to that question. So the other question is about the economy. I think that one of the biggest things that we're talking about quite often is about the economy, but for women who are not getting equal pay, the fact that we're in a suppressed economy right now, it's a devastating effect on them and their households. So what is the administration's take on getting to the Paycheck Fairness Act, as well as a few others that...
Absolutely. I mean, equal pay for working women and their families is something that the president has set as a priority from day one. One of the very first bill he signed into law, and he's very proud of this, was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. We signed it the first week we were in office. That was the act that people may remember, named for Lilly Ledbetter, who is the woman who actually never got to reap the benefits of the law because it was her Supreme Supreme Court case that said even though the pay discrimination against her had gone on for years and she never knew about it until someone slipped her a note and told her, do you realize that the men who are working the same job you are making this much more than you? The Supreme Court said she should have known about that and threw her case out, for overthrowing years and years of precedent as being, too late, filed too late. So he was really proud to sign the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. We are in strong support of the follow-on to that act, which is the Paycheck Fairness Act, that will further extend legal protections around equal pay for all and eliminate gender discrimination on pay. And the President has called upon the Senate to pass that. It's passed the House already. It's pending now before the Senate. He's called upon the Senate to pass that, so we're hoping that occurs. In addition, the President announced in his State of the Union address this past January the creation of an equal pay task force, which joins the various agencies, the Department of Justice, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Department of Labor, who all have responsibility for enforcing our existing equal pay laws. And that task force has announced its report, and they're going to be engaged in more information sharing, more enforcement and prosecution actions, and more education of employers and employees so people know their rights and responsibilities, so that we are able to better enforce the laws that we do have on the books. Because as I mentioned earlier, the disparity in pay remains and is tremendous, and it has a huge impact not only on working women, but on their families. Because one of the things we've seen in this recession is that more men lost their jobs than women, which means families are ever more dependent on the income of the working women and in their families to get by. And when those women are not taking home a fair paycheck, the whole family suffers.
And what about the Employee Free Choice Act? Is the administration behind that act as well?
The administration is in support of the Employee Free Choice Act. It is, as many things are slowly moving its way through Congress, but we are in support of that.
Okay. One of the other questions that have come up quite a bit is about Social Security. When we talk about Social Security, people have already paid into Social Security. It's not something where they're getting a check after the fact. They have already contributed. However, right now it's debated to be cut as a program. And so women who typically live longer, who live off of Social Security, will not be able to get the benefits of their own contributions. And what is the President's position about that, and who's organizing the challenges around that?
Well, I would say we, in addition to just having the 90th anniversary that we're celebrating with this web chat on the women's right to vote, we just passed the 75th anniversary of the Social Security Act. And the President issued a proclamation just a couple of weeks ago in honor of that anniversary as well, in which he reiterated his strong support for the Social Security system. I mean, it is a system that is responsible for lifting, millions and millions of women out of poverty. The situation for women, seniors in general, but women in particular, before the Social Security Act was passed, was, of our seniors really living in destitute conditions. And then not only just seniors, but the Social Security Act benefits survivors. It benefits the disabled and children. So it's a key linchpin, a key important piece of legislation and program for now several generations in our country. And the President's committed to strengthening it. We have a fiscal commission that is looking at how we deal with the current financial situation that we have, but that a part of that, he has said clearly, will be strengthening, not dismantling the Social Security system.
So I have some other key questions that I want to make sure that I present, and one is actually coming from Richard from the online chat, which was about stop human trafficking, which he considers modern day slavery, and wants to support health and safety reform for all Americans, particularly women and children. Are you familiar with this and the issues around human trafficking that happens quite a bit, not just internationally, but also domestically? And some of the human trafficking that happens domestically is called prostitution, but usually the girls who are sometimes put in very devastating situations are the ones put in jail instead of the Johns, of course. and yet they're not protected from, the challenges that are happening in their communities.
Well, we do. I mean, I know that the numbers, the estimates are as high as 250,000, especially young girls under the age of 18 being trafficked here in the United States, domestically, in addition to the international human trafficking that goes on. We do have an ambassador, on anti-trafficking, in the State Department, Louis DeBaca, who has issued a report, and his report reports on what goes on in the United States as well. So we are not turning a blind eye to that. It's something we've been working on with the Department of Justice, with our White House, our first ever White House advisor on violence against women, to try to address, those issues. We've met with, several of the organizations that help serve, these girls and, treat them, as women who need to be supported, not women who need to be punished, and it's something that we're going to continue to work on.
Thank you. The other questions, because we're slowly wrapping out of time, and I want to make sure we get in there, are about legislating equality, challenges with the ERA that's not ratified, including a state that the president calls a home
And that I'm
state.
from too. Right?
Okay, and that you, one of the bigger questions was, when will we move to having ERA totally ratified, and what's the position on CEDAW?
Well, first of all, I have to say that yes, I am from Illinois. That I cut my teeth as a young, first moved to Illinois in 1978. In the years in which we were trying to get Illinois as the only northern industrial state that never ratified the ERA to ratify it. At the president's, strong supporter of ERA. He's a strong supporter of CEDAW, which is the UN's convention to end all forms of discrimination against women. Both of those, in order to now move forward, will need to go through Congress, and then in the case of the ERA, will need to be ratified by the states again, because it's the ratification period around the original proposal of it ran out in 1981. So it's still a challenge to see how we get through the legislative process on both of those. They both require an extraordinary majority to be passed. So one can see the challenges we have around putting together the 60 votes for cloture, or the 51 votes we even need to pass some of the legislation and reforms that we're trying to right now. So we're still going to work on how can we accomplish that for the ERA? How can we get ratification of CEDAW, which would require 67 votes? But the president is on record as being strongly supportive of both of those initiatives.
I have another question that happened to show up on the blog Her Post that was about adoption. Sealed adoptions where mothers and children are both trying to find each other, where women in some situations were coerced in adoption, to adopting giving their children up for adoption. What is the president's take, or the administration's take, on dealing with the situation of trying to, as I was told, one of the only countries that actually seal adoptions and don't allow even adoptees access to their original birth certificates?
The issue of specific access to original birth certificates is a state-by-state issue. So I know that there are initiatives in different states to change, and have more open adoption laws. The president spoke last year in his Notre Dame speech around initiatives to help, support women who keep their children, to reduce the number of unintended pregnancies, and to support adoption as an option. And we are working together with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Administration of Children, Youth, and Families on different ways we can work to support adoption, as an option, support women who make that choice if they're found in the situation of having an unintended pregnancy. And we're going to continue to be working on those initiatives as time moves forward. But I think some of those initiatives will have to be state-by-state issues, because the specific issue of access to an original birth certificate is really one that's a matter of state law.
So I guess the other questions that continue to come up is just about what true equality is for women in their rights, including fair treatment from violence in the military as well. Having the right to have the rights of their own body and control of their own medical health and their reproductive health. Those are the main questions I would say were the last few that were important, and really wanting to make sure that the president, what his take was on that issue.
Those are a lot of questions.
I know, I'm like,
those are a lot,
and I have like 3 minutes.
Well, I will not be able to do them all justice, or the president's position on them in the time we have left. But let me say a couple things. First, that the president and Secretary Gates are, strongly addressing the issues of violence against women in the military, recognizing the contributions, the sacrifices that our women in the military are making right now is a key element, and we've made tremendous strides. I mean, one of the things I'm proudest to talk about often is the improvements we're making around the participation of women in the military. So, for example, for the first time now, women will be able to serve in the submarine corps and be officers. It's never happened before. It's a real achievement on moving the stature of women up through the ranks in the military. At the same time, we are addressing, the issues on medical care and services, and addressing issues around violence against women in the military. We have a new DACOITS, which is called the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services, headed by former General Claudia Kennedy. I know this is an issue she cares very deeply about and will be working on. The overall issues of violence against women, again, are front and center to what we do at the Council on Women and Girls. Again, Lynn Rosenthal, who I mentioned earlier, is our first ever White House advisor on violence against women, has an interagency group with the Department of Justice, with HHS and the other agencies that works on these issues. And in fact, she was instrumental behind one of the largest increases in the last year in the budget for services, to fund services for domestic violence shelters and sexual assault services, even in a time of budgetary cutbacks. And finally, the issue of overall equality is where we started, which is, even though it's been 90 years since women achieved the right to vote, we still see tremendous inequalities, like the pay gap that we've talked about, like the fact that women are only really 15% of Congress, even though it's been 90 years. I will say that, again, we're committed to making those changes, and I'm very proud to say that the president has really stepped up, and he has appointed not one but 2 women in a row. It's never happened before in our history to have a president nominate 2 women to the Supreme Court back to back, and we now have, for the first time in our history, 1/3 of the United States Supreme Court as women. And those are the kinds of achievements. It's now 2010 that we are making, but we're making them, and little by little, that promise that was part of the 19th Amendment 90 years ago is really coming to happen. But it can't happen by just the people here in Washington alone, and I think the folks out in that online community are a vital force in making sure that we get all of the equality that we all believe should happen.
Well, it's close to time. I have one more question, or we're done? One more question? Okay. Sorry, I was just checking on time. The question about equality that we just talked about, there are those that believe that we shouldn't do legislation to institute equality. But if that's the case, then does that mean that we're in a space right now where equality is not necessary? We don't have to legislate it and it will just naturally happen? Or does the government have to have a role in ensuring that women have equality?
Well, I think it's as all things, it takes all sectors of a society to move forward. So, we need schools to do their bit to make sure that we have more women go into the STEM fields, for example. One statistic is if you survey kids in the 4th grade, an equal number of boys and girls are interested in the sciences. By the time they get to high school, the number of girls who are interested in sciences have fallen off by half. And by the time you get through college, we find that only 27% of women in college are in the math, science, technology, and engineering fields. And those are the fields of the future. So we need educators to step up and parents to step up and support girls in the sciences. But then government has a place to make sure, for example, that there's no discrimination. So we have stepped up our Title IX discrimination enforcement in the Department of Education to make sure that girls who want to be in the sciences are given the same chances as boys who are interested, and that there isn't discrimination in higher education when grants are given out, for example, to people who want to do postdoctoral studies, and that those women who want to participate are given the same chances. And it's vital not just for women, but for the economic future of our country, because we will only stay competitive in these fields internationally if we have access to the entire talent pool. You look at things that we've talked about, the wage gap. Again, employers need to step up and pay an equal wage, but when discrimination occurs, as clearly happens, government has got to play a role in enforcing and making sure people like Lilly Ledbetter aren't unfairly taken advantage of and discriminated against. So, it is a situation where we need both private citizens to step up, but government needs to play a role as well in both encouraging it, funding things like STEM education initiatives that will reach women and minorities and young girls, but at the same time, be an enforcement mechanism when things don't get done right, and people need to have redress.
Well, thank you for that. This is the last question for the day. And I, again, am here from BlogHer, one of the leading participatory news, information, and entertainment networks. We have 21 million women a month that participate online who are interested in not just politics, but also news and information that they trust and share with each other. And again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and being here. And Tina, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in the chat.
And no one really, again, echo your thanks to everyone who was online, who submitted questions, who participated, mostly for being interested and caring about this issue.
And if there are any other questions that I was not able to get to today, because there were quite a few, we will do our best to make sure we do a follow-up post and get those questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you.